When you have quorum.
Yes. And here she comes.
You're fine. Because my computer's really slow.
Oh, good. I got it.
Now.
Okay. So let's call to order the planning board meeting for Wednesday, August 17th, 2022. The first item that we have on our agenda is to approve the minutes of the July 20th, 22 meeting. And we did get two sets of unapproved minutes. One, we added to, and these will be the minutes that we are approving. And I just want to make sure that we're all aware that there was a clerk note added to these minutes, and it reads, because Mr. and Mrs. Nelson could not attend this planning board meeting, as a courtesy, the planning board attempted to briefly convey its understanding of their written concerns. Apparently, the Nelsons felt that their concerns were not accurately conveyed. Their reference written concerns are attached here to for clarification. And their concerns, both their letters are attached to behind. So, does anyone have any questions or any comments outside of that, or including that they'd like to discuss regarding these minutes?
Move to approve.
Do I hear a second? All in favor? No opposed and no abstain. Okay. So the first item on our agenda is the Powell special use permit. Robert Powell, 1275 West Bloomfield Road, Honey Falls, requesting a special use permit at 1275 West Bloomfield Road, containing 9 acres to run a business training dogs in his farm for veterans and the community on said property, tax account number, blah, blah, blah. It's zoned RA1.
Prevent the agenda, it should be public hearing. It's been posted.
The Powell, oh, and
Yeah,
public.
because it's special use permits.
Okay, so, and a public hearing. Okay, so, Mr. Powell, would you like to come forward and give us a brief outline and idea of what you're going to be doing? Oh, okay, thanks, Teresa. Yep.
So, pretty simple little concept, have a barn. I'd like to use it to board and train dogs. I'd like to offer the services to veterans that have PTSD. It's kind of a way to give back to the fellow veteran. So I can do help them out so they can have a companion that eases their stress. The reason I picked doing the barn is it's a pretty easy way to start without investing a lot of money into it. So obviously as I grow, probably within the next 5 years, I'd hopefully grow big enough to where I could look for a more commercial location and then move out of the barn. But first step is trying to start small and use what I have available. That's kind of why I picked the barn to do that. Ideally, I'd have about 10 kennels in there. And the goal is to train 4 dogs, 3 or 4 dogs at a time. And then, as people, scheduling goes, just have a place where, hey, we're not quite ready to get our dog yet. Can you hang on to it? And until, like, some people want to get a dog, they want to train, and then they pick it up. Right. So just being able to have enough places where I can do all that.
Do you have any dogs yourself?
I do. I have it's kind of so I went to a course in Virginia for explosive detection dogs. So I have an explosive detection dog. I'm currently loaning to a friend in Iowa who was doing explosive detection work in Iowa. He and I became friends in the course. He has a bed bug dog. But he's found explosive work, so he has to be good to my explosive dog to work. And we were waiting for a Bernie Doodle to be born. That's our
A
name.
what doodle?
A Bernie Doodle. It's a
Oh.
cross between a Bernese Mountain Dog and a Poodle.
Oh, nice.
So,
Well, that's exciting.
yeah, so we'll wait for that.
So I was reviewing your, the letter that you sent to the planning board. And a few things that I noted, and I want to just make sure that I'm right, that your plan is still the same as we're starting to talk about this. The business hours would be from 7 in the morning until 7 p.m. Yes, is that your plan? Most clients have appointments or classes scheduled during these hours. Class size for group classes will be approximately 4 people with their dogs. So you're thinking maybe 4 vehicles per training session.
Right.
Correct? Okay. And you would also like to be able to board up to 10 dogs
Right.
at a time. Okay. Does anybody have, planning board, do we have any questions? I do have a few things that I brought up, I highlighted, but I was, any of you want to start a conversation here?
Are they all your dogs?
No, it'll be,
Customer brings a dog in, and you relate that dog to the customer, and then will the dogs remain with you? Or
No.
go back with you?
no, they'll go back to their owner. So that's kind of a popular trend right now in the dog training world. It's called a board and train. So let's say you decide to buy your puppy, right? And you're not a real dog person or haven't been, but you're like, I want to try it, or you don't have time to, invest in training your dog. You want a house broken, you want to have door manners, you don't want to bark at Amazon. You would say to a person like me, where I will, have your dog around my kids, and we get used to kids. I'll socialize your dog for you. I'll teach it, it's great training, take it outside, teach it how to potty outside, all those things, so that when you come and meet with me, and this is where the appointment time works out, is because, obviously, as a trainer, you can get the dog to do things for you, but now that you've purchased this from me, you need to make sure the dog can do it for you. So there would be a training window where I teach the dog owner the commands. We go through the commands so that they are, they feel comfortable enough to take the dog home and be a good pet parent.
You said you're looking at 10 customers. Now the boarding, would that be for those customers' dogs, or would that be on top of?
So 4 of them I'll be training at a time, and then the other 6 spaces would be like, kind of like, hey, you train my dog. I trust you with my dog. I'm going out of town. Can you keep my dog for me? Then yes, that it would be like an additional thing where they would just be pretty much, when you send your dog to any boarding place, that you take them out, they take them outside, do a little exercise, stuff like that. And
What's your background? Is it in the military?
I was a Special Forces medical sergeant in the Army.
And how do you happen to sneak away with an explosives dog?
So I went to the course after the military. So as a Special Forces medic, I worked closely with our dog handlers. If their dogs got hurt, I took care of their dogs just like any other soldier. So I got to see firsthand, how well you can get a dog trained and dog's capability. And so when I left the military, I wanted to do it. I wouldn't have the opportunity in the military because when you're a medic, they're short, so they don't let you volunteer to go be a dog handler. So I missed the opportunity while I was in the military. So when I got out, I was like, let me explore this. And so I went to the American Canine Addiction in Virginia for 3 months to become certified as a master trainer.
Okay. Is that new fencing you've put up by the barn, and it's for this purpose?
So that's for my wild children to keep them wrangled in.
Okay.
But yes, it will be used as part of it, so that when we are socializing, I can have, a space for, a puppy to run around and kind of get used to children. But I plan to, I'd probably put a little bit more fencing behind the barn, just as a place where the dogs that are doing the boarding and not so much the training, will be able to go outside and use that.
Will you have a provision for the animal waste?
So with the amount of animals, like 10, it's not going to be a ton of waste, and I would just, my one trash can would facilitate the amount of waste. And that's pretty optimistic thinking that I'd have like you know, the 10 stalls rented out, you know,
Yep.
every day of the week. I mean, fingers crossed, I guess. But
So there are a couple of things that are in our town code, which definitely apply to what you want to do. So I'm just gonna kind of read these out and maybe open us up for a little bit more discussion also. So the following conditions and criteria must be met for kennels. Any premises on which 4 or more dogs, 3 months old or older, are kept, bred, harbored, requires a special use permit. So this is what brings you to us. The keeping, breeding, and or harboring of more than 8 dogs, 3 months old or older, is not allowed. So we've got the 10 dog, so we can talk about that. The minimum lot area for such uses is 3 acres. Well, you've got 9, so you should be good there. The 100 foot away from the street or property line, you already got, you went to zoning for that, so you're good there. There's also in our town code, excessive loud barking or howling. And so, you know, that would be something you'd need to make sure that you were taking care of. Howling or barking for more than 15 minutes straight, or for more than 15 minutes in any continuous 60-minute period shall constitute habitual loud howling or barking. And then we just have a few, and I just highlighted a few things for home occupations. The major home occupation is determined to be clearly subordinate to the permitted principal residence use of the residential use of the premises. So obviously, you know, your house is your home first, this is your business. No more than 2 employees, which you said in your application, you would only have 2 employees.
well, I mean, it's just myself.
Right now, right? Okay. The board must find that the major home occupation is not likely to produce more noise than would exist in a residence without a major home occupation, and that the type of noise and times of day the noise generation are not inconsistent with the primary residential use of the premises. Pedestrian traffic, which you're not really going to have too much of that. Vehicle traffic. The board must find that the major home occupation is not likely to produce significantly more vehicle traffic to and from said premises than would exist in the case of a residence without a major home occupation. And that the timing of such traffic is not inconsistent with the primary residential use. So that might be something that we would like to talk about. Parking, I know that you said that you have the U-shaped driveway, and I am familiar with your property, so I know you have places for 4 cars to park. So, but if anybody wants to bring that up, and then Earl just brought up the additional waste, but he said that wouldn't be an issue. So, now that I've done all this talking, would anyone else like to kind of engage in conversation regarding this application?
What's the approximate distance of the closest neighbor?
That'd be right across the street.
Okay.
I just drew a blank on his name.
Do I recall you saying, reading something about your intentions to insulate the building for sound?
Yep, so that'd be the plan, is to insulate the building, and then, depending on how some pet parents feel, there are bark collars, things like that, if most people would know what their dog will do, and, there'll be a kind of meet the dog before the dog gets to stay there, because I obviously have kids, and I want to make sure that my kids are safe. Right, so I wouldn't want someone, oh, this dog has bitten 15 people before, and I don't want that kind of stuff in my barn. So there'll be a meet and greet to make sure the dog will be able to be around other people, and that'd be one of the things that we look for. During that, the dog is like, hey, this dog, since it's come to the barn and gotten used to it, has not stopped barking. So at that point, like, hey, are you okay with us if the dog becomes an excessive barker? Are you okay with us putting on a bark collar? And if they're not, then maybe this isn't going to be the place for you, because obviously we have neighbors that are close, and that'd be a conversation to have with them. But yes, to insulate the barn is going to be one of those things.
Yeah, that will go a long way toward.
My father-in-law, or not father-in-law, but my dad owns a recording studio, so he's pretty good at soundproofing stuff. So when the time comes, approval happens, we'll look at the investing the money to jump with the market.
So now, do you expect that these classes will happen every day?
Nope, because the plan is to start small. I work as a paramedic still. So I usually work, 3 days, 3 to 4 days a week. And then, so it'll be kind of, those classes will mainly be scheduled around that. And obviously it kind of depends, because I can transition from being a paramedic to doing that more full time. Classes might pick up and not all classes will be done there, a lot of classes will be done in parks, public places, because that's the goal, is to be able to get the dog comfortable and, well behaved in public places, right?
So you've done such a great job explaining this, but of course I still have questions. So the intention is that someone's going to purchase a dog or a puppy. They're going to want it trained before it comes home. So this is where you step in and you're going to take this puppy or dog and you are going to keep it for an extended length of time and train it. And once you feel that dog is ready to go back home or to its new owner, then you will have these classes for the dog owner so you can show them and
Right.
teach them how to train to be with the dog.
Yes.
Okay. So you're not talking about having, it's not like a dog training facility, so to speak. So you're not just going to have a family, 4 families sign up, bring their dog in on a road, for a 4-week session of dog training.
Right.
Is that part of what you're
that
going
would
to
be
do
a
also?
part of my business plan to offer, like, hey, I don't want to pay for 2 weeks, but my dog needs to be touched up. We sent him to off leash canine, 2 years ago, and we've kind of gotten lax at some of that bad behavior is coming back. Hey, can we come to your house and spend like 2 hours, just kind of reorienting our dog and working on those behaviors. I wouldn't want to say no, but it's one of those things where I can also, hey, we'll meet at Minden Pond Parks or something like that, and do it. But initially, I would like to see that at my house just so I can evaluate the dog kind of in a safe place, controlled environment, see how the dog's going to do before I say, oh yeah, let's meet at Walmart and
Right.
the dog eats Walmart people up.
So is I think where I'm getting at is this going to be a rotating thing? So maybe your thought is to offer a 9 a.m. class for dog training for 4 weeks, and you might have 4 people sign, limited to 4 people sign up for that section. Then maybe 11 o'clock the same morning, you're going to have another 4 people come in and do some dog training. Is that your intention also, along
Yes.
with the other things that you're doing?
Yes.
Okay.
So the goal, it's one of those, like, it's kind of a ebb and flow, right? So if, let's say I book out for 3 months where I have training boards, right? So warden trains. That's not going to be a lot of time to do those, 1 to 2 off classes, right? But let's say no one's wanting boarding train, right? And I wouldn't want to say no to somebody saying, hey, I don't have anything going on right now. Can we do, can I come by every Tuesday for, an hour? I wouldn't want to say no to that.
Right. So are you willing to amend your business plan to reduce the number of dogs that you would have? The code says you can not have more than 8 dogs, including your own. So you'll have 2, right?
Well, I've one that currently lives with me, so.
One,
Not
but
yet.
the other one's coming back, right? Your explosive dog is coming back eventually.
It depends on how. much-
Okay, so-
yeah, So,
But so you can't have on your premises more than 8 dogs at any one given time. So are you willing to amend your business plan to reflect that? I'm not saying,
so, okay. No, so I must have missed that because I thought that was kind of the whole special use permit to have. I thought that was no more than 8 dogs if you were like trying to breed animals. So I didn't know like the.
Does it specifically say board?
we don't specifically have, our code doesn't specifically address what you're asking for. So we're kind of pulling in different pieces and parts to make this happen if
Right.
if it can, within the confines of our code. So, you know, we've done kennels before, similar maybe to what you're, maybe not, but we have strongly adhered to the 8 dogs maximum. And that does include your own dogs.
So then it would be a total of like 6 dogs is what you're saying, so.
Right.
So then, well, then I guess I'd have to say no, because then like financially, just wouldn't, to invest the money into the barn to do that, I wouldn't get the welfare, have my money back. So,
Right.
Does it say 10 dogs boarded or 10 dogs present?
It says the keeping, breeding, or harboring of more than 8 dogs, 3 months or older is not allowed.
What if
But
he's
it's
boarding 4 and training 6?
He's still keeping them.
What's the definition of keeping?
Well, what I mean, is what if they
yeah, I
come,
mean-
what if they're there for the day and then
Okay,
they're
let's
leaving?
let Don kind of, our legalese kind of,
I
chime in here and see if he's got any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Because I'm just reading off the code, so.
so I think, you know, the board in the past, we've handled a few of these now, and generally we have looked at all the dogs on the property. You guys remember that?
Yep.
So
Mhm.
a few of you were here for that.
Yes,
And so that's how the board has, in my recollection, interpreted these provisions of the code. So looked collectively at all the dogs on the property, because it's a residential property first.
right.
And this isn't like we're having a kennel out in a commercial district. You're having a kennel on a residential property. So I think that's why the board is conservatively viewed.
Well, so when you pull up the map and it says what the land usage is, it's not it's labeled something other than residential, and it's also not labeled commercial. It's just, I forget what the term is, I just remember looking at it when I was looking at this, so.
You left your use district blank in your form here.
That's because when I looked at the map, I wasn't sure how to label it, so that's why I'm asking you guys, because it didn't say commercial, residential.
It's RA.
I was gonna say, I think it's an RA1.
Yeah, it's RA1.
Yeah.
When a dog comes to your business, is it going to definitely spend the night? Or are people going to bring their dog in for a couple hour tune up and then leave?
It could be,
And if so, do those dogs that are in transition count against that 8?
I think that, no more than 8 dogs on the premises at any
At
time.
any time? Okay.
At
Does
any
it say
time.
on the premise?
Huh?
Oh, here, let's back up here. We're asking questions. It's this board's job to sort of judge the application. So he's asking for 10 plus his own dogs, I think.
Mhm.
What about 10 plus 4 training plus your 2? Is that the max? Is that what you're saying? Or are you
Right.
saying
Well,
10
I
in
mean,
total?
10 in total, I mean, like, obviously, I'm hoping to grow a business that I can move out of my barn, right? But, I'm trying to start small, right? So like, obviously 10 wouldn't support me going to buy a commercial property, right? So, but I would need about 10, like, so at $50 a night per dog, right? It comes out to about $10,000, and that's before taxes, and that's before any kind of feeding and any other cleaning costs, bleach, all this stuff to, maintain and take care of the animals. So, I'm just trying, because I'm trying to, build it, and I don't want to go into a lot of debt, so I'm trying to do it, as cheap as I can, but 10 is kind of like the number when my wife and I looked at, like, doing this and trying to transition from doing paramedicine to, having this be the full-time thing. That was kind of our goal for keeping 10 dogs at a time to maintain our life quality.
To make it feasible.
Yeah, right.
So is 10, again, just to be clear, you have 10 dogs being boarded and 4 training, so 14, or 6
No,
being
so
boarded? and
6
4
being,
being trained?
well, 10 would be boarded. I'd be training 4 of those, and then
4.
6 would be just like,
4 of the 6
either-
boarded dogs,
Right.
4 of the 10 boarded dogs you would be training.
Right.
Okay, so you're talking about a max of 10.
Unless you have people coming for those additional trainings, correct?
And those would just be, they would come with their dog and leave with their dog.
The 4 that you're training, the owners would not be there.
No, I would have those dogs trained. So, the guy we're getting our dog from, Bernie Doodle, he, gets a lot of customers from New York City. Right, they want, obviously, there's a lot of, noise complaints and stuff like that, so they'll send their dog to him, he'll help them, overcome that. And then they come pick their dog up. So yeah, most of the time it's, you leave your dog with me for 2 weeks and then I'll have your dog, to where, you're satisfied. And then, your dog will go home with you and then, every, 6 months or so, they'll come back. I'll just make sure the dog's doing what it's supposed to be doing, or I'll travel to them, make sure the dog's doing what it's supposed to be doing. And then, kind of go it that way.
Trying to look up the last one we just did. Caves we've done, and then there was Johnson. Yeah. Caves was 4. Johnson is,
He reduced his amount too of dogs.
yeah. 5, inclusive of his own dogs. So if you have people bringing on dogs for training and you have 10 boarded, then you'll be at 14, right? If they come to your property.
Right.
You have
Well,
total.
so the 4 people training, those dogs are just mine. They're at my house. No pet person will be there, right? I'm training these 4 dogs for a customer.
Yeah.
The other 6 dogs that'll be there would be just, hey, we're going out of town. You're going out of town. You want to drop your dog off, and I'm just watching it for you.
Yeah.
And then there are classes on top of that, right? So let's say I'm at in the pond walking one of the dogs I'm training, right? And you're like, oh man, I wish my dog was like that, well behaved, right? He's went through some training a few years ago, but we haven't done anything since. Can I stop by, and have you work with me for an hour or 2 with my dog? Yes. I would like to be able to say yes to people.
Yep.
If that's the case. Because that's kind of how you would build hey, now that I've trained your dog and I know your dog's trained, that's who I want to board at my house. Typically you want to have dog boarding in your house that you have trained because you know your training values and ethics, and you build a relationship with that pet parent so that you know how they're comfortable with you treating their dog and how the relationship's there.
Yeah, I mean, this is the tricky thing with the code in kennels is that it defines kennel, it talks about kennels, has that limitation on 8. Then there's additional activity that we're addressing. We struggled with this before in terms of how do you apply the code relative to an application like this. That's sort of the kennel plus, because he's doing the training there as well. But in my, time with the board has been, has at least referenced this chapter in my recollection, had most of stuff like this.
Could that be construed as 8 dogs boarded? And
I think it could be, yes, I think you
It sounds like- I
theoretically
get the
could
feel
construe
it's
it that way.
8 dogs boarded.
It says the keeping, breeding, or harboring of more than 8 dogs is not allowed. The keeping, breeding, or harboring.
If you were boarding 8 dogs and had 2 that were coming in for a few hours and then back out again, does that sound like something?
It's possible, right? Like I said, right now it's just a business plan, right?
Right.
We gotta grow it.
You're starting out in a small business. You really have no idea how things are gonna go.
Yeah, I mean, I just know, so I have reached out to another veteran who runs Bridgeside Canines. They're out of Virginia, and part of his business plan is help veterans become small business owners, and the way he does that is through dogs. So establishing kennels and training like this, you become your own business owner. He went from training in his barn over an 8-year period to now he runs a multi-million-dollar dog training, dog boarding facility out of Westchester, Virginia. I don't want to get that big, right? I want to be able to just kind of, full disclosure, right? Past 18 years of my life, I've spent away from my family, trying to find a way that I can work from home and see my kids. I was divorced twice for deployments. The Army was tough on that. I have 3 kids that I don't know very well. I have 4 that are small, under 4. So the motivation behind this is to be able to support them and be at home more. And this is the best way I can think of to do it. And that is why I am asking for this.
Okay, I see he didn't know. Okay, he just tugged at my heartstrings. I'm all about it. Oh, this is a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, the board can certainly talk through it, can open the public hearing to see if there's anyone here from the public to speak. Doesn't look like there is, but.
Right?
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is to find a happy place between 8 and 10.
Right.
If you had 8 dogs boarded,
Well, I mean, so the question is like, so it's pretty much, I could do that, but then I couldn't have personal dogs, because then, my personal dogs it'd be 6, so like, if it doesn't work, that's fine. It's not gonna break my heart, right? I mean, like.
It's gonna break my heart.
But, it would be the first time I told no, and probably won't be the last time I told no. Obviously, I was like, hey, let's see if this is possible. So, hey, I went through the process, right?
where are your personal dogs going to be? If you,
They'll be at my house with me.
in the house, so that almost shouldn't even count, should it?
And then you have, the barn would be where when we're, the 4 that or the dogs that I'd be training, ideally it'd be 4 dogs, but it may be just 2 dogs that I'm training, because, nobody wants 4 trains at that point. But let's say there's 8 people that want their dogs boarded. So that's kind of the reason I looked into this, right, was because there are multiple ways to make money from this, right? Whether if boarding trains are up that month, I'm making money doing that. If boarding trains are down, but people just want to go out of town and travel because it's the 4th of July, then, there's some income coming in from that.
Right, you really don't know what your model's gonna look like.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
I mean, that's the typical model of most places that do this, right? Most places don't just do training, or I guess most places probably just do boarding. I think add-on, I think they only do boarding.
Yeah.
And then there's another place in Farmington which they offer boarding and training just based on their website. Yeah. But I just know there is a demand for boarding, because I was at a dog park yesterday, and this was in Geneva. They're like, yeah, there's no places really in that area, so they drive to Kenyan, or they come up to like, up toward this area to board their dogs. I just know that most people, 9 out of 10 millennials bought a dog during COVID, and what do they like to do? They like to travel. I'm just trying to watch their dog and play with it while they're gone, and make money doing it.
You have 2 dogs of your own.
Currently, there's no dogs living in my house right now. I would like to be able to have a dog that I train and show off as a demo dog. Was like, hey, I can take your dog from this to this. That's kind of the purpose of having the dog.
Where I was going is, do you have a place you can put your personal dogs while the others are there?
So I'm a big believer in kennels. So when I say kennels, not like the dog, but just crate train, I guess, would be the crate training. So when we're at home, our dogs will be with us wherever we are in the house. But when we leave the house, they go in their crate, and then so our dogs would be in our house. The dogs that are there for boarding and training would be in the barn and then the ones that are being boarded and training, they will be in their kennel in the barn, except for when I pull them out to train them, you know, kind of, and the training is kind of, it's not a blanket one size fits all training. You sit down and you come up with like an individual training plan based on what the customer needs, right? So like, let's say the customer's buying a dog, he has small children like me. Well, in that case, I'm gonna want his dog to be, you know, around my children more. So that dog will be in my house a little bit more, you know, until, you know, he graduates from like controlled environment in my house to, let's say, controlled environment at Tractor Supply, a little bit more distractions, stuff like that.
Which would mean you'd have to have one of your dogs there as an example for the training dog.
That's the goal, yeah. I mean, most people don't want to take their dog to a trainer without really seeing what they're doing. It's kind of like going to a dentist. You don't really want to. That may not be the dentist you want to pick, right? Or a hairdresser that has messed up hair, maybe not so much.
So here's my suggestion, the board, you know, these numbers are sort of causing a challenge for everybody.
Well, and including that, you know, the numbers, not only for the amount of dogs, but, you know, I'm thinking that the vehicle traffic, the disruption maybe to the other neighbors with
Right.
just a lot more activity going on. I mean, I love this idea. I mean, I want this to work for him, but I think we have to continue. That's just
Yeah.
kind of where I'm going with this. Is there's a lot more than just the
Yeah,
number
I
of
think the
dogs.
board's gotten a lot of information out of the applicant. Now it needs to sort of deliberate on what's the right, you know, what's appropriate for the property, given where it is, given what the code says. You're kind of looking at two somewhat separate but related items. You're looking at boarding and the training. Some boarded dogs are going to be trained, so it's not going to add anything to it. Some dogs are going to be brought on the property that aren't boarded and trained. So how does that figure into the equation? I think, you know, the code seems to speak to kennels fairly clearly. Talking for the boarding, you're at least talking about a kennel. And the ZBA actually granted a variance right out of the kennel section of the code.
Mhm, I did see that.
So it seems like their position also is that the deal
Right.
is similar to a kennel relative to the keeping the dogs in the barn at least. Whether you want to look at the training from offsite dogs separately as an add, I don't know. How we feel in terms of the impact to the sort of intensity of use of the residential property. But
I do have a question. Let's say I bought goats. What's the max number of goats I can have on my property or cows?
Animals, those are the verses.
I don't know offhand on
Yeah.
goats.
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
either.
prepared for this.
I just know there are a lot of, you know, there are a lot of other animals that are noisy. I'm in the process of getting rid of 3 roosters. I didn't realize that. I wasn't supposed to have roosters. I didn't buy roosters, but when they matured, lo and behold, there were 3 roosters. You know,
Yep.
so,
So you're hurting for eggs.
yeah, so, well, I wanted eggs, but now I have roosters that, you know, I have to deal with. But, you know, so obviously animals make noises, you know, if we called it a dog farm, would that change the, you know, it's a right to farm town. We call it a dog farm. It's not a dog
Farming
kennel.
dogs now?
Well, what do you call it? It's a cow farm. We farm cows, you know, so that's just my question, you know. That's kind of the appeal to move out into a more rural area. It's like you have a little bit more freedom in what you want to do and how you want to use your land. That's kind of what.
As far as increased traffic and such, if you had 5 people picking up their dogs on a Wednesday, you wouldn't tell them, okay, everybody come at 1 o'clock.
Right.
Right? You have the power to space that out.
Right, and so we just installed a paved driveway and we just put in I think it's 24 by 24 parking pad that can park 4 cars. Well, the paving company says it can park 4 cars. Probably not SUVs, but small cars, maybe 4, but you know, that pad is on there. And that was one of the things I put in my plan as far as reducing traffic, you know, it's not like they're gonna back into my driveway and then have to back out, you know, they can pull all the way through. There's a parking pad there. And then, you know, so the traffic, yeah, I don't know if that would add any more traffic than what's already there. You know, because the amount of people that we, you know, that traffic, it's a pretty high traffic area, whether I'm there or not.
Item C says that all dogs per kennel shall be owned by the resident owner of the property.
Well, that's for, like, if I, so my understanding.
Hold
of
on,
this-
hold on. Yeah, we don't, so we can ask the applicant questions about his application, but if we want to discuss the code, let's do it.
So,
what I'd rather do.
well,
Hold on just a minute. So that portion of the code is also somewhat troubling. I think the way that that's been interpreted in the past is that if you look up under a different section of the code, what ownership means, it talks about ownership and control. And so I think the way that that's been interpreted in the past to actually give this meaning, so we can actually use the code, is somebody who's in sort of control of the dog. So if they're left there to be boarded, I think that's how it's been interpreted. You can certainly ask the code enforcement officer for interpretation on any of this stuff, if that's what we want to do.
I think that's probably a good step for us. Should I open a public hearing now?
Yeah.
Just to
Can I ask one more question? Sorry. So, because my understanding of that kennel code, that's like if hey, I'm a big dog lover, I want to have 15 dogs in my house. You're not trying to make, it's not, because I kind of thought this was like for a business, right? So the special use permit was for a business, and so the rules for that are if you're like trying to just, hey, I just want to have 15 dogs, or you know, whatever the case may be, you know. Like I'm the crazy cat lady, right? And I have 75 cats in my house, right? That's kind of what you're trying to prevent for dogs. And I thought that's kind of why you need to go through the special use permit for more of the business aspect to have more than that. Because it seemed the way I read it and my interpretation of it was that was more for like personal use, just so you know, not so much trying to have a business, right? So that was kind of what the special use permit was for the establishment of a business, you know, and the request of my numbers for my business. And so all that aside would just be factored into what you guys, you know, that was one standing thing for just like, hey, we just like 15 dogs in our house, right? Not trying to make money off of it, just, hey, you know,
I don't think it has anything to do with the other.
doesn't seem like, it seems like that code is written for non-business specific, you know, things.
Talks about breeding. No, I don't know if breeding is typically done for pleasure or for profit, but again, I think us debating the meaning of the code isn't going to be terribly fruitful, especially with the applicant. I think if we truly need, you know, direction, we could ask the code enforcement officer for his interpretation of the code. I still think that even if we are, I think regardless of whether we think that applies, we could obviously still this, you know, the home occupation code tells us to look at the use and put conditions on it relative to consideration that this is a residential property. So whether we take that up under advisement, that number 8 or not, whether the code
Right.
applies, we could still look at that as advisory. Not to mention the fact that the zoning board certainly was looking at that section of the code,
When they granted
the variance.
the variance, and they may not have granted the variance. We don't know if they had been looking at a different
Right.
part of the code, right? Because that was where they had to find a place, so.
But I think, you know, one way you could look at it is you have the kennel portion of it for the dogs that are being kept boarded there, basically. And then if you want to have any, and maybe there's a number there, regardless of whether we're looking at this specific section of the code for a numbers limitation, you could still look at it from the standpoint of how many dogs are you allowed to board? How many dogs, in addition to that, are you allowed to walk onto the property and train? So you're still playing the numbers game. You still got to figure out where you end up.
What's
in
a
terms of the numbers
reasonable,
game. Yeah,
and since this is the first one that I know of in our area that has actually come before us with a business plan that looks like this. you know, we are going to, the decision that we make here may affect, future
Right.
applicants also. And so if we set aside the kennel part of this and we just look at the home occupation part of this, you know, so I'm sorry, I'm just trying to go through. So the major home occupation shall be subject to the site plan approved by the planning board. Yay. I know, I don't want to hear that. The occupation must be fairly transparent and unobtrusive. So, you know, I'm thinking, when you're thinking that, you're thinking if you have a, you know, a home business or something, and you're kind of running your own business out of your house, maybe you have 1 or 2 employees, they come, they're there for a set amount of time and then they go and nobody really knows what's going on.
Well, it actually goes through and lists all the different factors to consider when you're talking about whether something is.
Transparent and unobtrusive, the A through.
Right.
Yeah, okay, so, well, let's open the public hearing right now and see if anyone from the public has anything that they would like to add. So at this time, I will open the public hearing. Anyone? No, no public online either.
There was, a Wendy who left.
Oh, she left. Okay. All right, so, with that being said, I guess we will close this public hearing. And I, do I hear a second? Okay, in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, so our
Well-
public hearing is closed.
Yeah, I will advise that there's a separate definition section of the code that's not in the zoning code. The zoning code refers to it, defines kennel as any premises on which 4 or more dogs 3 months or older are bred or harbored.
I'm sorry, could you read that again?
The definition of kennel for our code is any premises on which 4 or more dogs 3 months or older are bred or harbored.
But he's, by your own admission, it's a kennel, right? And you won't be breeding dogs inside your house.
So, I mean, well, that right there would just be everybody that has 4 or more dogs would have to, get approval to have 4 or more dogs. So, and that's why there was a bunch of people said, don't even ask, just do it, right? And, there's ways to hide it. I was like, probably just, getting a lot of, just trying to do the right thing and go through the process.
So are we, yeah.
I know.
So
And I
right
feel
now,
badly that we don't have a full,
I
that
guess
we're missing people here too tonight for additional input.
Yeah.
he's okay with it being classified as a kennel though. Am I missing something? He's gonna have 4 or more dogs in the kennel portion of this.
Because he wants to have more than 8 dogs, and our kennel code says only up to 8 dogs. That's the issue.
Are we able to issue special use permits for specific periods of time? And my thought for that would be if he would be willing to reduce the number to start with, maybe for 6 months, we could issue it the special use permits with certain conditions, falling within the dog, the dog limit, and we can then he can come back to us after that specific period of time where he's had some time to get things under his belt. We can see if this is any type of disruption to the neighbors or to the neighborhood. If there's any traffic issues, noise issues, anything, maybe it's all going smoothly and like nobody really knows anything that's going on. And so maybe then we could up it then to maybe the 10 dogs that he's asked. I'm just asking if that's,
You can put
if
a
that's
10.
something that we could do, and if that would be something that you would be willing to, entertain that idea, that thought.
For the discussion there.
Yeah, you can put a limitation on time for a special permit.
Would he need to come back,
Yes.
to the planning board then, maybe at our next meeting with a revised business plan, an initial revised business plan for us to consider now that we've all kind of pulled this apart?
I think. I mean, it might work better for us that way. I don't think it's necessarily required that he come back, but might give the board some time to consider what to do
Right.
here.
I mean, I would hate to give a negative
Yeah, you don't have to make.
determination
You
tonight
don't have to make any
when
decision
there
tonight.
could be so many other things that might be able to help keep him on the path to this. Maybe in six months, you'll say, I thought maybe I'd always have 10, but really I do only have 8 or 6 or whatever. Or maybe you'll have enough 20 and you'll be like, you know what, I really have to find myself more of a commercial spot because this has just grown so quickly that, which is what I would hope for you. Well, but you want to stay in your home, right? So that would be. So we don't have to make a determination then tonight. We can ask him to come back at our next meeting.
You can give him the option to.
The option to, if he would like to come back to the next meeting, with maybe a revised, plan that kind of fits more into what our code says, at least for, a 6-month period of time so that we can kind of just, everyone can get their feet wet and see what's happening. Is that something that you might?
It would be September 7th. would be the next one. So a couple days after the meeting. September 7th. Done. Do we need a public hearing for that or no?
Well, my question would be then, if it's under 8, then do we even have, do we have to do the special use permit?
I think
Yeah.
you still do because
Okay.
it's a home occupation.
So if it's 4 and under, there's no special use permit. So the number is between 4 and 8. is
Well,
the
I
numbers
actually-
You guys have defined for.
Yeah.
Well, actually, because it's a business, he would have to have a special use permit, correct?
4 or more dogs is a kennel that triggers the kennel code. I think regardless of whether it's a business, it says any premises in which 4 or more dogs are bred or harbored,
Okay.
but it doesn't matter. You're not looking for anything you're not looking for less than 4 dogs anyway, so.
Right. Okay, so, if you were willing to come back, we're willing to have you come back and, revisit this. And, I think the board can, dig a little bit more into the code, also get their own handle on it. We are missing a board member and Teresa has to recuse herself. So there's just the 3 of us here, and I feel like that's not doing a service to the community if we don't have a better representation.
One
at this
thing
time.
everyone can think about ahead of the next meeting is how you apply those numbers. In other words, just let's just say for simplicity, you have 2 dogs. No, I know you don't have them right this second. Let's say he has 2 dogs. Is 8 minus those 2 dogs? Or is 8 plus those 2 dogs? That's one question for y'all to consider and think about. And for you also to think about. But another question is, how do you figure in the training dogs, the offsite training dogs? Is that, so now you're playing with all the numbers. Is it 8 plus 2 plus 4? Or is it, right? So this is what we need to think about going forward is what are we comfortable with? What are you actually proposing? Break those numbers down for us. And then the board's gonna have to think about what it's comfortable with, given what the code tells us about, moderating the intensity of the use of a residential property for use that's not necessarily totally residential in nature. But I mean, the driving factor on these things is they're supposed to be subordinate to the residential use.
Mhm.
So you don't want to have a business use that now becomes the primary use of the property or competes with it for the property, the primary use of the property. You know, if you're saying, oh, I have a new person coming in to train every hour, every day, that's a pretty intense use for residential property,
Right,
right? Just as a contrast.
Right.
It's obviously not what he's proposing, although it'd probably be a dream.
but it
Which
could
case you
happen,
get you
right?
could just get a commercial property, but just to sort of what your appetite's on, how to think about this.
Thank you, and thank you so much.
Public hearing or no?
Oh.
Is it necessary?
Part of it depends on what you're going to do with your application. And part of it also, I think given the, I'll say this, I would do a public hearing.
Okay, that's fine. I just need to know so I get balance.
Yeah. See how much of the public came to this one?
Obviously, no one's too concerned.
So I'm going to, do you want to do the 7th? Will that work? for
Yeah,
you? Or do you,
I
if
mean, yeah,
not, it
it-
goes to the 21st?
I can get back with you. I just gotta make sure.
Yeah, we'll talk tomorrow or whatever. Sure.
Thank for all the information. Sorry. we couldn't-
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sorry. we
I
couldn't-
didn't
Yeah.
expect a decision tonight. I just,
Sounds like a great thing.
yeah, thanks for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay, now, moving ahead, we have the Donaldson subdivision and site plan public hearing. And we have Mr. Lewis.
You guys all have copies of the same thing here. Since our last meeting, we had a few things to clean up with comments. The plan that is before you now, I have passed, I've emailed out the plan that's shown here. Takes care of the fire suppression issue, takes care of the turnaround issue in fire suppression, or fire department. Takes care of the information since I provided pictures to the town engineer, code enforcement officer in regards to the wetland delineation issue. The creek along the north side. And the town engineer responded back favorably on that. The only issue there we have now was some stormwater things, but I think we can work that out with some narrative. Pass back on to Jason to review. And that should take care of his comments.
Okay.
What I understand. And then I think Earl had a comment about topsoil stockpile locations, those are on plans. And I think there's only one other issue with code enforcement or whatever your floodplain deputy is there to, they're about 500-year floodplain.
Yeah, we would defer to the code enforcement officer for that.
Okay, so it looks like pretty much as I looked at things, you addressed pretty much all of the concerns that,
Yeah, I got Corey's comment this morning and it was a matter of sitting down and taking an hour or two just to make sure I take that within the 50-foot separation from the lot line.
right, and Labella had no concerns other than, that you needed to, provide a SWIP for the stormwater. And a few, things that they would like to see included in that. Does anyone here on the planning board have any, comments or questions that they'd like clarified before we open the, public hearing? No? Everybody good?
Yeah.
All right, so at this time, I will open the public hearing. And would anyone in the public like to be heard? And if so, please stand up, state your name. And we usually like to keep it to a 3-minute narrative. But since you're the only one, we could stay hours if we need to.
My name is Eric Nelson. I reside at 82 Lemon Road, so that is
two properties to the south of this property. My wife and I owned this property for 25 years. We sold it to the Donaldsons about a year ago. So I came tonight. The primary reason I came was to be sure that the record reflected a couple of things. I wanted to correct the record. One is that, first of all, I could not attend the July 20th meeting because I was in Maine for a memorial service for my mother. So I wrote a letter expressing, my wife and I wrote a letter expressing an opinion and a viewpoint. And at that meeting, Mr. Holliday was here, who lives basically between my property and the Donaldson property. And I think 70, I think it's his. And he was complaining that he hadn't been notified of the meeting in advance as a contiguous property owner. And the chair basically said that all the property owners were notified. And that was not the case. So I wanted that to be corrected. Like, I know the Holidays weren't notified. I know my wife and I were not notified. I knew of the meeting on July 20th because I read about it in the Sentinel. I don't know what the town's policies are, like you're supposed to receive notification by mail or whatever. I just want the record to reflect we did not receive notification of that meeting. Secondly, when I watched the video of the meeting, I was really disappointed to see that our letter was frankly misrepresented to the applicant and to the board. Basically, the chair essentially said the Nelsons wrote and they wanted to know, did the Donaldsons consider public water? To which the engineer, Mr. Lewis responded, it's too far and it's not financially feasible. And the subject was dropped. Well, the reality is that our letter didn't ask whether the Donaldsons had considered public water. Our letter was espousing the viewpoint that given how many people in the town of Mendon have very poor well water quality and don't have access to public water, that when the planning board is reviewing an application for property development that is 1,000 feet from public water, it seemed to us that it would be perfectly logical to require that developer to bring water in, as opposed to simply rubber stamping two wells in an area where you know that the water quality is horrible. I've lived here in the town of Mendon for 40 years. I've served on 3 committees trying to bring public water to Fountain Hill, Quaker Meeting House, Landing Road. Every time it's been a great frustration for me personally. Mr. Moffett, the supervisor, I copied him on my letter. He sent me an email basically saying, look, the planning board doesn't have the authority to require the applicant to bring water in. And I assume that's the case. Although I will counter that by saying that if I had sold the property to a developer, and we had 2 or 3 who came to look at the property before the Donaldsons looked at it, I'm pretty confident that if sitting here today was representative of a small developer who was proposing to subdivide that property into 5 lots and build 5 homes, that this planning board would find a way to make sure that a developer brought water in to those 5 homes. I'm pretty confident that you might not be able to legally require them, but you could find a way to put pressure on them to make sure that you brought public water to those 5 lots. So the other thing that disappointed me in the July 20th meeting was there was no follow-up to Mr. Lewis's comment that, it's too far away and it's not financially feasible. Like, to me, if I'm sitting on the planning board And we have this problem in this town, and you know the well water quality is gonna be horrible. Seems to me somebody should have followed up and said, well, did the Donaldsons get a cost estimate? If so, how much was it? Did the Donaldsons compare that cost estimate to the cost estimate that, or the cost that they're gonna experience to drill wells, put in water treatment systems? When I built my house 27 years ago, I spent $12,000 on chlorinator, holding tanks, carbon filter, water softener. I think it's reasonable to assume it's probably twice that today. Maybe more. There's the cost of maintaining that system. There's the cost of replacing your appliances significantly more often than normal people replace their appliances. There's the cost of replacing your plumbing fixtures and so forth. So it just seems to me, again, if I'm sitting, what I'd like to see is, I'd like to see a planning board that basically says, look, this is not a desirable situation. You know, when I went and reviewed the application, I was really disappointed because I had talked to Mr. Donaldson several months ago. Probably 6 months, five or 6 months ago. Honestly, I'm not sure which Scott Donaldson I talked to. I think I talked to his father, but I'm not positive. And I talked to him about the quality of the water. I told him, you know, you don't want to drill a well here. You want to bring water down. The other question I would have asked as a member of the planning board is, did the Donaldsons get a cost estimate, and did they approach the neighbors and say, any chance you would like to go in on this with us and help to reduce the costs? So I just, my point is that when you have this problem of poor water quality and lots of people in the town don't have access to public water, and it's not, at least from my perspective, it's not from lack of trying. You can't get rural development grants, so forth. But it just seems to me that when you know that the well water quality is going to be very poor, and they are 3 football fields away from public water, that you would do everything you could to encourage the applicant to bring in public water. So that was the point of my letter, not did the Donaldsons consider public water. I wanted the planning board to actively advocate for them to bring in public water. Frankly, I wanted the planning board to require it. Doesn't sound like they can do that. So that's the point I was trying to make a month ago. That's the point I'm here to reinforce.
Thank you very much. I think, is there anybody else on, so I think we will close the public hearing at this time. Can I have a motion and a second? Teresa? Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Any abstain? No. Okay, so here we are. Thank you very much for your input. And I don't know that it just is not within the jurisdiction of this board to require someone to bring water to their home, public water. We can't do that. It's not in our town code. That I will state. You know, you did say that you spoke to the Donaldsons. They knew the quality of the water. If, you know, I'm sure that all points considered, they did maybe weigh out the differences.
Still not speaker, no.
Go ahead, just a little bit.
Because I forgot to add, what I told Mr. Donaldson at that time was, look, there's a number of neighbors here who would love to have public water. My understanding was he either was a contractor or he had, I was under the impression anyway that he had contacts where he would be able to get a cost estimate fairly easy.
Well,
And so I said to him, my suggestion to you is get a cost estimate and then come back to me and the other neighbors and say, this is what it's going to cost. And let's see if we can work something out. And so frankly, I was disappointed when I showed up to review the application back in the middle of July to discover that, they're planning on drilling 2 wells in an area that they're gonna have minimum 120 grains of harvest.
Okay, so does anyone have any additional things that they want to add to this application regarding the water, the ponds, anything before we make a determination on the approval?
At this point, we can give an approval on that site. There's nothing that says that the water cannot come down that road tomorrow. If Mr. Nelson and Mr. Holiday and the Donaldson work out a system with the neighbors across the road. If they enjoin you to design the system and do on a private LLC or whatever it's going to take to do this, that's between you. It's not, it's nothing to do with us. We're at this point here.
Has anyone approached the water authority on their intentions of putting this in the pipe network? I don't know if where's the water to the south? I know it gets used Factory Road. Is there one along the next road to the south? Is there another main?
No, the water from Chief to the north. Then if you go to the south and east on Bowden Hill, Mr. York, Frank York, when he built the home on the south side of Bowden Hill Road, he personally brought water in from 64.
Right.
The water line came in to cover 3 houses on Bowden Hill Road from 64. From the days when they put the reservoir in that Harris Road.
Right.
So Mr. York extended that line from those 3 homes all the way to his property. So it comes about halfway on Bowden Hill. It comes about halfway from 64 to Lanning Road.
So how many feet?
So sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm just gonna say that this is probably a conversation that you guys can have after our meeting, just because it's kind of not relevant at this point. So any planning board members have any additions that they would like to? Don, do you have anything that you would like to add, or Jason?
I'll just, confirm what we talked about the last meeting, which was, the board, it's not really within this board's purview to demand public water for this project. In reviewing the letter from the citizens, the board begged the question and talked about it with the applicant, which I thought was accommodating. So I think, property owner decides they want to go ahead and pursue that, so be it. If they were in a district, like a lot of town codes have things such as for sewer district, for example, that says if you're in the sewer district and you want to build, you need to connect. Right, but that's not the case here. They're not in a water district, to my knowledge. Relative to notice, I'm fairly sure, but I would have to check with the clerk on it, but I don't, for special use permits, written notice is required to each property owner that's abutting the subject property. But this application isn't for a special use permit. So I think the notice for this is notice in the newspaper, which you got, which you saw, I should say. And then additional notice for the ag data statement, but that's only for, I think it's only for farm operators. So if you don't have a farm, you wouldn't be getting a mailing to your house. Your notice would be in the paper, on the website, things like that. Not a direct mailing where there isn't a special use permit or farm operation involved, to my knowledge. So just to clear that up.
And just to be clear, you did send those letters out. And so
To farm operators?
no, she sent them to all of the abutting properties, and some people received them and some people did not receive them. And so,
I made copies of all.
yep. So they were sent.
And looking at the code, it doesn't seem like that's a requirement.
Subdivision. Yes.
Okay, I didn't see that in there.
Special use permit. From what, this is what I've always just been
Okay.
told.
It's definitely
I don't know
in the
that it's in there.
It's definitely in the special use permit code. I
Yeah.
look at the subdivision code, I didn't see that in there.
That'd be good to know.
So if there's no further comments, I think that we were anticipating approval of preliminary and a final with a few conditions. So I asked Don to, draw up a resolution for this. And, would you like to read that to the board and to the,
Yeah, sure.
so that we can,
So you have before you, I think you have before you a resolution.
yes, we do have
Do
a
you?
resolution.
I pulled
Yes.
the old ones. on the 17th.
Yep, so it's entitled resolution for your consideration. It's entitled resolution approving
I've seen this.
subdivision site plan application for property at the west side of Landing Road. 941 feet south of Cheese Factory Road. Then I'll list the tax map number. I'm going to summarize the whereases. Whereas an application received from Scott Donaldson for preliminary final and site plan approval. And be it resolved, the planning board approves parts 2 and 3 of the EAF. The negative declaration is issued. Be it resolved that pursuant to the site review report by the town amended ECB, though the project does include EPODs 3 and 8, the project does not propose development that would occur within either of those EPODs, and thus EPOD development permits are issued relative to EPODs 3 and 8, but only for construction which is located in the area consistent with the subdivision plat approved by this resolution. Be it further resolved that pursuant to site review report by the town amended ECB, though the project does not include development in EPOD 9, the proposed houses will be built above flood elevation. Thus, the EPOD development permit is issued relative to EPOD 9, but only so long as the houses are constructed above flood elevation to the satisfaction of the building inspector. Be it further resolved, the preliminary and final subdivision approval and site plan approval relative to the application, all in accord with last map submitted, which is last revised August 17, 2022. Which includes site plan approval for the resulting lots, is hereby granted subject to the following conditions. All outstanding written comments to the fire marshal will be addressed to the satisfaction of the fire marshal prior to the building permit. All outstanding written comments to the code enforcement officer will be addressed to the satisfaction of the code enforcement officer prior to the issuance of the building permit. And all outstanding written comments of the town engineer will be addressed to the satisfaction of the engineer prior to issuance of the building permit, including specifically relative to the SWIP. So that's what we've done, regardless for consideration.
Hey, members of the planning board, how do you feel about that resolution? Would you like to take a vote on it? Okay. Anyone would like to make a motion to approve? Second? Charlie? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? Nobody, nobody's lost. It's okay, we're all good. Okay. So I guess congratulations on this. You work with Corey about the conditions and all that, and you'll get your building permit when it goes on that. So you can go if you want, or you can stay for our end of the evening housekeeping. Okay. So our upcoming next meeting, we have a couple of meetings coming up. So what's
Battersea subdivision that includes the battle site plan.
yes,
The Moore subdivision that was submitted is really a site plan, so that'll be amended. I'm going to put on the application tomorrow. I'll get you all the updated information. Yes, I know. That's on the side. We don't know about Robert all of that. I will confirm.
right.
Email you. And on the 21st, we have the Fiore special use permit and the Stott special use. For
Oh. Okay. All right. That was for which day?
that will be the later September.
The later September date.
You have 2, possibly 3, and the 21st. You have 2. As of now. The cutoff for that was today.
Okay. Anyone else with any general discussion? Would like to make a motion that we close this planning board meeting?
I move.
Okay, Charlie, Earl,
Second.
second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Then you know, the rest of it is just all of us said yes. Adjourned.
Okay, please hold while I.